Welcome to the Entrepreneur Stories podcast. Jonathan Herps is your host. He is a strategic advisor, coach, and mentor to entrepreneurial founders, business owners, and CEOs. In this podcast, he chats with entrepreneurs, founders, and CEOs of scaling companies. It centers around their entrepreneurial journey so far and their aspirations for their companies.
Hi there, it's Jonathan Herps here again. Welcome back to my podcast, Entrepreneur Stories of Scaling Up. This is episode number 105. Today I'm talking to Geoffrey Bell, who's CEO and co-founder of Microbiogen. Welcome to the call, Geoffrey.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. Very happy to be here.
I really appreciate you joining me, and it looks like you've had a very interesting journey. I'm just going to read a couple of things from Geoffrey's website. Australian Technologies Competition in 2021 winner energy category. Premier's New South Wales Export Awards 2021 winner sustainability. Australian Export Awards 2019 winner minerals, energy and related services. And there are a pile of all of those. So obviously you're doing something right.
Yes. We certainly not overnight successes, but absolutely things are going the right direction now.
That's one of Steve Jobs' greatest quotes. Amazing how long it takes to be an overnight success.
Yes, very true.
So tell us a little bit about your entrepreneurial journey so far and your company.
So probably like all people, I've got somewhat different story than you might expect. If you go back into the past, leaving school, I was one of those guys that, there wasn't anything more scary than getting a 9-to-5 job. So I went and I was, used to collect rocks as a kid, had no idea what I wanted to do. So I went to university and did a geology geophysics degree. What I did know is I wanted to have a good time when I was young, but at the same time I recognised that at some stage in the future I'm really going to need a job and let's get an interesting job. So I guess that's where my strategy started. But what was a little bit different about me was in my second year of university, our family decided to start ski tours to Austria. We were all mad keen skiers, so this was the perfect lifestyle for me. 9 months at university and then 2 or 3 months skiing in Austria as a ski guide, parties every night. So fantastic. And so I extended that for about 10 years, doing ski trips. And then doing degree after degree. So I did a full bachelor's in geology geophysics. For my technical side, I did a bachelor's in economics and then went on and did a master's of applied finance. And it was really interesting. So from the entrepreneurial perspective, you'd probably think, well, what are you learning? Actually, you learned a lot running ski tours. You learned about marketing. I learned about, if you're going to make money in business, you better be in a business that can make money. And while ski tours was a fantastic, fun business, it wasn't something you're ever going to retire on. So, going through that whole period was very, very interesting. And it was the real challenge came when I was like 29 years old, 3 degrees, and I tried to get a job because my idea was to get into financial services, into stockbroking. But anytime you talk to a stockbroker, they're going, yeah, but you got no experience. Anyhow, so look, through the whole process, I did a couple of years as a geologist. I ended up getting a job. So I did eventually get into stockbroking. What was nice is that my competitors, if you think I was, like 30-odd years old, I'd never had that grind of 12-hour days. And here I came in fresh. I had plenty of background around me and experience in running my own business, and so it went really well. So, within 3 years, top-rated analyst, and I did the next 15, 20 years in stockbroking. And it was through that period where I realised that, yes, you could be an analyst or a stockbroker, but it's a really tough job, a lot of hours. So I started this company with my brother way back in 2000 and basically said to him, hey, I'll give you the money with you and your other principal scientist. You work out, you've got these blockbuster ideas in this biology field. Come back to me when you've got some real things that I can work with. And within 6 years, they had what we call a proof of principle breakthrough. And then I used my stockbroking connections, raised $5 million, and then said, okay, I'll quit my day job and work full-time, be CEO of Microbiogen, which is what I've been doing ever since. So it's kind of this 3-stage thing, the fun times, university, stockbroking to actually, generate some capital. And I got a admit I have real respect for people that go out and start a business without having some financial goals already achieved, because it's so risky. And then it's been the biology, the Microbiogen journey for the last, now, I guess, I started full-time in 2006, so that's 17 years. I thought it might be 5 years, but it's taken a lot longer than I thought. So that's a very rough overview.
Yeah, so what does Microbiogen do?
So we specialise. Your audience would know we work with what you'd call baking yeast, which you go, gee, big deal, But actually, it's the number one microorganism in the world. Without it, there's $2 trillion worth of products you don't get. So think of things
that was baking yeast.
Baking yeast, but it's super widely used.
Right, okay.
You can imagine, fuel, biofuels, beer, wine, insulin production. It was the first organism ever sequenced. So very, very, very widely used, and we just specialise in that. So we're very narrow in the sense of we industrialise, make it do things it can't do better, and a whole range of new things. But its application is super wide. So that $2 trillion over the next 20 years is going to go to 4 or 5 trillion. It's just going to expand. So that's what we do.
Right. So to me, it's an interesting journey. If you had to start from scratch, what aspects of your personal or leadership development do you think you'd prioritise?
That's a good question. I've been thinking about, what would you do differently? I think one of the big challenges is coming from a background of, running ski tours and then being in investment banking, stockbroking, and those sort of things. You're either having fun with a bunch of alpha males, and people are all gambling in the stockbroking companies, etc. When you go to a company like this, you're going very much a very, very big change, because you're working with almost everyone in our company as scientists, and scientists are way more introverted rather than extroverted. So you have to transition from working with people who are out there to people who have a very different view on life. And that you need to work with these guys to make sure that you can take them along the journey. So for example, I never had to, scientists don't generally want to ask you commercial questions because that's not their area. They're very focused on what they do. They're very good at what they do, but it's a whole different ballpark and game to play. So you've got to work out, how do I bring these scientists along? How do I incentivize them to be with us long term? Because, we want people who are with us for 10, 20 years, because we train them, we do extensive training, and no good having someone come for 2 or 3 years and then leave, which is very much what goes on in other industries. But we really need to avoid that. So that's a big change for me, was getting used to the new type of personalities that you're working with.
It's we talked earlier about going down rabbit holes, and I'm going to go down one now, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And I'd like to sort of just ask you a bit about AI. And, a personal story. I have a little bit of an experience. Nothing like where you are, of course, but I was misdiagnosed in 2013 with a lung disease, that idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, that I was given 3 to 5 years to live. Bit of a shock to the system. Yeah. And it fundamentally changed, my and my wife's life, and the way we, where we went with our life in a very positive way. I was asked to, the professor that was looking after me, Tamara Court, she runs the interstitial lung department at RPA, just a phenomenal person. But it was fascinating. So I was asked to help coach, their fellows and the interaction with the professors. I did a bit of time over a couple of years, and I was also one of the crash test dummies for the registrars in their final exams, because it was such an unusual thing I had. But I've been fascinated with, and I'm fascinated with AI anyway. I'm using it everywhere in my business now, but. They had there was no solution for this disease. But in the middle of COVID, a company in California raised $13 million in 18 months using AI and big data they found a solution. If I'd had it now, they could save me. How is it? AI must be affecting your business unbelievably, I would think.
You would think so. In our business, you need to divide into two parts. So we're all about microorganisms and improving them. And there's two components to that. You can work with genetic engineering. That is, you go and construct things and put them in and make microorganisms do new things. Or you can do what we primarily do, which is actually a breeding technology. And to give you a concept of the complexity, we specialize in this Baker's yeast. It has about 6,500 genes. The number of ways that you can reorganize the genes within this yeast is more than the total number of atoms in the universe.
Wow.
So, huge complexity. In fact, in that particular sense, AI could be very, very useful, but you need the data to do it. Where AI comes in would be in the genetic engineering side of things, because there you need to know what you're doing before you do it. So our technology is what's called is essentially a black box. We breed, we make this genetic diversity, and we don't fully understand what we do at all times. That's the funny thing. So AI is probably less important to us at this stage than it would be for those doing the genetic engineering. Now, we're not anti-GM at all. We work with partners who do GM and they GM our strains, etc. But our focus is and our competitive advantage is through what people would think, well, that's boring old technology. But actually, we spent a lot of time really advancing breeding into the 21st century. So we can do things now that you just couldn't do before, which means we're getting industrial applications that can't be replicated by genetic engineering. So they're doing two different things. You can do some things with GM that are really fantastic, some things with non-GM that are fantastic, and we put them together. But at this stage, believe it or not, we can't find applications in AI yet. We would need where the AI will come in is, let's give an example. So an industrial feature for a microorganism will be acid resistance. We've developed yeast that are super acid resistant, like, the lowest pH that a normal yeast can do is 3.5. We've got pH of 1. Now, we don't know what we've done there, but AI will become very important because now that we've developed that, the genetics are there. We don't know what's doing it, but if we can sequence it and get all that information, then AI may well be able to go and figure it out. At the moment, humans can't figure it out. It's a very, very difficult thing to figure out because it's what's called multiple phenotypical changes are required to make something industrially better. And to figure that out is mind-bogglingly difficult. We've tried it before. We've worked with universities, and yes, we had some success, but this was for a single, simple thing. For that, something like an acid resistance or temperature tolerance, these are multiple genes involved, probably hundreds. And to figure out how they all work together, that's definitely going to be an AI thing, but I think it's for the future, not quite yet.
Interesting. Sorry, I apologise for taking you down there, but I was just...
No, that's fine. I mean, it's one of the really important things for us into the future is figuring out what we've done. Current technology struggles.
But, tell me, how do you balance your personal life with the demands of running this business?
Well, that's one of the reasons I went into this business was to do just that.
Right.
So when I went into the business, I made sure that this was going to be a life balance business. And we don't just do it for me, it's the entire company. So we make sure. So we take it very seriously. If people have kids, we let them, we say, you organise your day such that you get the work you need to get done. But if you've got to go and pick them up at 3:30, that's fine. You do it. Just make sure you work around that system. So we very, very much like to have that work-life balance, and that's the entire company. So, as I said, working 12-hour plus days is an absolute, and working really hard for those 12 plus hours, it's going to put you in an early grave, in my opinion. So I definitely wanted to get away from that, and we've made sure that we do that. So we do have a very good work-life balance. So, and funnily enough, with the company that we've got, sometimes the most important thing I can do is nothing. You've got something you want done, you're waiting on a response, because our business model is collaborating with big global corporates. These are big companies, and you can't hassle these guys. Things just take time. And sometimes you just have to take a chill pill and go, okay, I'm just going to relax, and I'm just going to wait, and I'll do something else. But we're not that sort of company. We're not developing apps. We're not out racing. We're business to business, and we're business to big business. So it's not the real value add for our business is not the hours you put in or the grind. It's getting the strategy right, building the right relationships, and delivering something the customer really wants. So we haven't really had that issue, and we do make sure that's a really important thing for us. And to give you an idea, I think we're quite successful. The average employee, we have been expanding, but if you go back and don't include the new employees coming, our average employee's been with us for over 13 years, average. So once we've got people here, they seem to stay. I don't know whether that's because they can't get another job, but they do seem to like staying with us.
Well, it's interesting because my next question is, what qualities do you look for what qualities do you look for in your employees? And you've answered part of this already. And how do you foster a positive business culture? So I think you've answered part of that already.
Yeah, part of it. I mean, the other thing we look for, of course, we're science-driven. And there's a couple of almost mutually exclusive things that go with science. So what we need is scientists that are meticulous, because we've got all this expensive equipment. If you make a mistake in an experiment can go for a week. Most experiments fail, of course, because that's the way of science. But you need to be very meticulous and get all the protocols right. And if you don't do that, you're just killing time. At the same time, we want inquisitive and, thinking outside the box solutions. So we try and get a mix of people that are the harebrained, come up with ideas people, and then people who are absolutely meticulous and happy to work and be that sort of person, careful with the equipment, make sure everything's done correctly. And that's a certain type of person does that as well. So those are the two things I guess we're looking for. And I guess the overlay on top of that is that, we like people to stay a long time, because for us to train people, it's several years to really bring them fully up to speed.
So do you all work in an office? Are you remote? How does it all work?
So the scientists pretty much all work in the labs because it's all hands-on. Management, I'll work 3 days in the labs, 2 days from home. And from home, I get more done because I can just focus on it. But in the labs, you need to see people, et cetera, et cetera. And most of management would do that. But then we're over 80% scientists. So scientists are in there.
Okay.
They need to be in there.
Thank you. So I'm coughing, and I've mentioned it. I'm in Barrel, where I live in Barrel in the Southern Highlands, and the temperature today is between 4 and 9 degrees, and it's currently about 7. So, apologies for that. What do you think has been your biggest learning since you've been a business owner?
I guess as I talked about, the learning was around, how to. When I came into this company, I couldn't even spell the word Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and that's the yeast we talk about. So, getting to understand the business. And I think the learnings of this business is get the strategy right. You've got to, that's your key thing. I spent 5 years trying to figure out what the strategy of this company was. A lot of companies go out and do things, and in our part of the world, not necessarily in Australia, but worldwide, there's a lot of companies in industrial biotech. Very few of the smaller companies make it. And in fact, some of the companies, can make it, and I won't name names. There's a recent company that's just gone bankrupt. And when I look at what happened there, they spent billions of dollars. But the problem was, they had really cool tech, they had really nice looking outcomes, and it was all looking good, but the money they had to spend was never going to justify the return for the shareholders. And that's, it's the basic strategy. You have to get that right in the first instance, because if something's never going to make you any money, we're all for money companies. Investors don't give you money to make a loss. But you need to really make sure. So when we look at biofuels, for example, so we partnered with Novozymes. They're the largest industrial biotech company in the world. Now, we developed the world's best biofuel organisms. So over half of North American ethanol production right now is using organisms developed by Australia. But if I'd gone to the US market and tried to manufacture and sell that myself, you could have given me $250 million and we couldn't do it. And would I have ever got a return on it? But by partnering with the leading North American supplier of enzymes that already had people already in the ethanol market, they just added another product. And they've gone out there and done all this, in faster than we could do it, better than we can do it, with better returns we could have done. Plus, I'm not spending anything. They're doing all the hard work. We just get a return. So that sort of thing is really important to figure out up front, rather than trying to sort of say, I've got this really great idea. And it always concerns me seeing, a lot of companies will have solutions looking for a problem. And that's not the way you need to have a real solution for a real problem, and not, so much get too caught up in what the trends are at any one time. And, for us, our journey has been, we worked on biofuels from 2006 because we determined that was going to be an important thing. That was 17 years ago. We've also determined that alternative proteins is going to be an important thing, but we didn't just wait. We've been working on this for 15 plus years. Human foods, more nutritious foods, all these things were strategically looked at and thought, where do we focus our efforts? What's going to be important in the future? And you work towards that rather than sort of pivoting. In industrial biotech, very difficult to go around and pivot meaningfully. Maybe you can in apps and other things like that, but scientific research in biology is really long-term stuff. It's a bit like the guys that do the pharma and the med tech things, new cancer drugs, stuff. These things all take a long time. Very difficult to just go around pivoting to something different. So that initial strategy, super important. Get that right first.
It's interesting to say that. I wrote a blog last night that's coming out next week of the three things a CEO needs to, essentially for a scaling company, the three things that the CEO needs to focus on. Strategy, vision, priorities. So setting those and then talking about them to stakeholders, to investors, to your team, etc., and continuously talking about it. That's number one. The second one is having the right people doing the right things in the business. And the third one is having enough cash to support it. Spot on what you've been talking about.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. I mean, we're now at the interesting part of the company where we're leading the world in biofuels. We've got several new things so we're on that hockey stick curve now. So our revenues have been going up. What's nice about us is, for an industrial biotech company, our revenues are going up 50, 60% a year, and our margins are over 50%. Now, when I say margins, that is every dollar we spend in this company, everything, we still collect $2 for every dollar we spend. So we're actually generating cash. Becomes problematic when you want to expand the company. People go, well, why do you need the money? You're making money. Well, actually, we're in a hurry. We're a company of 30 people. We're competing with companies with 10,000, 20,000 and vast resources. And just because we've been smart enough to work it out early doesn't mean we're always going to have that advantage. And so we do need to make sure that we have all the resources we need without overspending, because, again, you've got to say, well, what is the end result here? I'd much rather be collecting $10 for every dollar I'm collecting, because that's going to make the shareholders the most money. Go out and spend $500 million for a $550 million return is, sure, you're a bigger company, but shareholders aren't better off. So that's the other thing is everything to me needs to be directed at how do I make my shareholders money and at the same time have a company where people want to work there.
Sorry, quick question. Are you a public company or are they private investors?
No, we're private. We're private at this stage. We are considering options around liquidity. I mean, to think about it, and we've had institutional investors on the book since 2006. They're very supportive. One's out of the US, one's out of Europe, and they're very happy with the performance. But people have been there a long, long time, so you do need to look at and private companies. We've only got 13 shareholders, and we've been going since 2001. So we've only had one capital raising round. Really, that was back in 2006. Other than that, it's corporates come on board and wanted shares and stuff like that. But we really, really haven't done a lot of raising. And again, that's to be non-dilutionary for our long-standing shareholders to maximise their returns.
Absolutely. Congratulations. So what are your major challenges that you're facing now in the business and going forward?
So we developed a super valuable, unique technology. One of our real competitive advantages is to develop those genetics that I talked about, those unusual. It's going to take you 10 to 15 years, even if you start today. So that's a competitive advantage we want to take advantage of. So we've got this really valuable lot of genetics. The real challenges we've got now is how do we get those out into the market in a sensible way without taking too many risks? Because we don't want to put that at risk. So our strategy is to partner with the big companies, and we like to partner with big companies, the competitors today, who become our best friends tomorrow. So if we can convert the biggest guys from competitors to friends, then that's actually, to me, a good strategy. So it kind of precludes you from doing something. So you could go out and build our own yeast plant and start selling ourselves, but as soon as we do that, our friend becomes our competitor. It doesn't make sense. And again, it's for example, in baking yeast, companies out there would have 75 full-scale production facilities around the world. These are big businesses, billions and billions of dollars to build this sort of stuff out. So there's no point us doing that. What we want to do, leverage with those guys, but to go from, yes, we've got a product that we think is good to a commercial agreement is really a long time frame. You have to build relationships with the companies. They have to get comfortable with you. We're in an industry where people have been promising a lot and delivering very little. So there's a lot of skepticism around whether you can actually deliver. That's kind of changed because we're now number one in biofuels. So people now do know we can do it. So that helps. But it's that, how do I take these products? They've been in development for 10, 15 years. They're actually ready now for commercial and full-scale trials and deployment. And there's multiples of them, whether it's human antioxidants, nutraceuticals, human baking yeast, biochemicals. There's a whole range of things that we can deploy. So it's getting from where we are today to get that deployed.
Okay. Tell me, when you think of the word successful, who comes to mind and why?
Yeah, I see all the same people that everyone else sees, all the big tech guys, et cetera. But, I kind of like, if I look at, I kind of like the guy that kind of starts off as the little guy. When I think about that, I think about Harvey Norman. Because I remember, I'm old enough to remember when it was, his first shop opened or something like that, and he was, the big guys were trying to squeeze him, and he's.
Yeah, and he was a door-to-door vacuum cleaner salesman.
Yeah. So I look at that and think, that's from go to what, beginning, he's done, a really good job. I've never met him or anything. I'm just looking from a distance, but that seems to be a really, and he didn't do it through just raising tons and tons of capital. He actually did it, through bootstrapping, I would probably call it. So no, I was very impressed.
Okay. You're the first time that's mentioned Jerry Harvey. Thank you. And once again, interesting enough, I did a blog last week on entrepreneurs, and that's what this podcast is all about. It's about people like you, people. It's actually focused at entrepreneurs with between about 8 and 50 staff. That's right. Our target market when we go recruiting our interviewees. Because that's it's target market of my business, but it's there are specific lessons that we can, as you've shown already, that my listeners can learn from that that segment of the market. So you've got a bookcase behind you, so I'm assuming you're a reader. Readers, podcasts, etc. You might recommend.
I'm terrible because when I read for relaxation primarily. I'm a bit of a science fiction fan. I like, when I'm reading, I'm trying to relax and try and, avoid, to me, reading business or stuff like that's not terribly relaxing because it reminds me, I'm trying to separate things out. So bit of a science fiction fan. I mean, if I'm on a plane, I'll read like a Lee Child, one of those Jack Reacher books or something like that, just to rather than sitting watching movies. But I have tried to read some of those books in the past, but what happens is I read the first couple of chapters and I just agree with everything they're talking about and going, well, what am I doing here? So I'm trying to find something where, I get, I don't know. I'm just one of those people that doesn't read those books terribly well. So I tend to go for the entertainment rather than.
And I think that's a really good point in itself. We have to find ways of switching off, which goes back to one of those earlier questions about balancing life and business. And I'm like you, I do a lot of reading because it's business reading because I'm interested in it, and my job is actually to summarize a lot of these thoughts into really easy to digest snippets. But at night I'm like you. So my favorite sci-fi writer is Andy Weir. Is there anybody else you'd recommend?
Larry Niven, if you get the chance.
Larry Niven.
These are all 80s, so they're fairly old, but they're not terribly dated. Good science fiction doesn't really date terribly badly. And I always thought he was pretty good. The other thing about reading is I do spend at least an hour a day making sure I'm on top of everything that's going on in the space we're in. And it's really important whether it's in the, what's going, because there's so much going in the world, biofuels. It's not just, it's alcohol to jet, it's all sorts of stuff. We need to know what's going on. So I spend a lot of time doing that. So that's why when it comes to reading, I'm trying to, transition away from business side of things. So,
I understand. So tell me, last question. Any last piece, last advice or parting words to other business owners who are looking to grow?
Yeah, look, I think it comes back to my previous comment is really think through your strategy. And probably half the companies out there that in our little space, you just need an envelope, a pencil, and someone who knows your particular space, and you can work out whether this is a good idea or not. Some of these companies have they're raising hundreds of millions of dollars and they're putting them into things that just aren't going to work. And I'm always scratching my head going, how do I get to talk to that investor? Because they seem to be happy to invest in things where the due diligence hasn't been done properly. So I really think, and there's two reasons for this. Number one, it'll give you a better journey, but it also doesn't screw it up for everyone else because the more companies that do stuff and screw up, the harder it makes for those that don't because, people get more and more skeptical about some of these things. But, get that strategy right. Is it a real thing that you're trying to do? Can it make money? And I'm being quite specific around biological sciences here. I think for a lot of other things, maybe it's an easier thing, but that's my area of expertise, and absolutely just make sure it makes sense.
It's fascinating. When clients start with me, I send them off with a pad of paper and a pencil or pen. Go and sit by the water, go and sit in the mountains, your favourite place. And here is a one-page tool I want you to work on. And it's a thing called a 3-year vivid vision. The concept comes from Brian Scudamore, who launched 1-800-GOT-JUNK in America, largest franchise in the world, or fastest growing franchise in the world. And essentially, write down over a couple of pages, what is it you want to achieve? What is your vision? Forget about the house. Forget about any of that. Yeah. What is it you want to achieve? And then from there, I throw a bit of my military background in, and I get them to summarize that into a leader's intent, a why, and what it is, and that's like a couple of paragraphs. And then we go and do one more tool, which is 3-year winning moves. What are the key things that are going to double, 10x your revenue and profit over the next 3 years? And those 3 one-page tools are the basis of doing strategy. We can go out and grab all of the textbooks and all of the theory and everything else, but at the really basic level, it is getting down on paper, as you say, what is it we're looking to achieve, and then finding the people to help you do it.
Yeah, and it's really important to understand that a book can't tell you what to do. If you're the expert in this field, make yourself the expert in the field. Figure it out, and you need to be the person that makes the decision. Work it out. What can go right? Look at what's going to go wrong as well, and look for the reasons why it's important to look for the reasons why it's not going to work without being a pessimist, but realistic. Go and say, well, what are the challenges in doing this? What are the barriers to entry? Is there a terminal problem with this whole thing? Can I do it? So and that should only be a page.
I agree.
If you're in the field, you should just think it through and go, okay, think about the head. Can I do it? No, I agree 100%. Yeah, absolutely.
If anybody wants those tools I just mentioned, ping me an email. I'll shoot them out to you.
We're kind of a little bit past that now, hopefully.
Well, no, actually, Geoffrey, I'm not sure.
You can do it any time? Okay.
Yeah, well, I have my clients reviewing their vision every year because things do change. And as
actually, you're dead right. I mean, every time we come up with a new product, you got to think of the same thing. Hey, I got this, a new baker's yeast. Is it actually, does anyone actually want it? Is it going to make them any, all that sort of stuff. Absolutely, those questions.
And it's backed into where are you going? And you did mention that it's hard to pivot, but in fact, in some ways, because you're developing new products and new technology, you are pivoting.
Absolutely, you're pivoting kind of the whole time, but not. I mean, for example, we don't want to say, well, we're going to pivot out of biology into mining or something like that.
I get that, but it's also that. So I work on a 3-year focus, on a 3-year focus, and a quarterly sprints to get there. And that 3-year focus, like if your chief scientists decide they want to retire, well, that will affect. Like there's a lot of things, and that's why every year I have my clients do their 3-year vision and strategy. But it's look, and let me finish by saying congratulations. You've built a fabulous business. Not bad for a drunk ski instructor / stockbroker.
Yeah, well, certainly wasn't. I guess it wasn't in the plan. Because when you start a business, and that's the other thing to think about. When we started this thing, I was just out there helping my brother. PhD, he'd been working with a big yeast company. He'd already had loads of experience. He was a molecular biologist, him and his other principal scientists, but they worked for a company, I don't remember, Burns Phil, but they were a big yeast company. They made some very poor commercial decisions, went bankrupt. So he was out at university with all these ideas. So the idea was I'll just fund him into his own company because I was helping him out, and he said he had all this really good, really meaningful, cool tech. But when you start, no one knows when you start the company where it's going to end up. But you do need to get some basics in place. So we put together shareholders agreement, and then you go, okay, well, let's see how it goes. But I think for most people, it's all, this looks like a good idea, but it's all a bit of, making it up as you go when you're first. It's not, you don't have, I think there'd be very few people have some grand plan from the start of the company to where they're ending up. I mean, if you'd said to me when we started the company, we're going to end up where we are today, I would have said, I don't think so. I would have said, that doesn't sound too likely to me.
Well, and it's interesting. If I can give you another analogy, this is episode 105 of this series. This started in July last year when my son, I've got two 8-year-olds. So my 8-year-old son and daughter were trying to drag me into the water in Fiji. And I was listening to a long-form Tim Ferriss podcast, 2 hours. And I was in the water. I just jagged on this concept of having a chat with entrepreneurs. That was where it came from. And basic questions, keep it to half an hour. And it's taken a life of its own. Like there was never a plan to get to 105 episodes. I thought it might be 10. And 105, and it's now one of the 4 things that I do in my business. I love these conversations. I coach. I develop one-page intellectual property that I can use. I write daily, taking those books and summarizing the ideas. And I do these podcasts. They're the four things. And when I say I do the podcasts, I interview. I have nothing to do with anything else. It's working out, what's your unique ability? What do you love doing? What are you good at? And then delegate the rest. But here we are a year later and 105 podcasts later. Who would have thought?
Yeah. That's just the way it works. And I think everyone needs to understand that but really important when you start it is, even though you don't know where it's going to go, you probably need to start with the right foundations in place.
Exactly right. To
do that, then that makes it easy.
Yeah. Hey, Geoffrey, you've just proved why this is one of the four things I do in my business. I love the conversations. I've really enjoyed talking to you.
Okay, well, I appreciate the time having a chat, and I'm actually interested in some of your feedback, so very useful.
Well, thank you. And there's some great lessons that have come out of this one, as they always do. So I really appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
If you are hearing this message, you've listened to the entire episode, and for that, we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed this new episode, and if you did, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you watch/listen. It helps this channel more than you know, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the learning gets. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in entrepreneur stories of scaling up. If you want to be a guest on the podcast, please send an email to admin@scaleupgrowth.co. Put "Be a guest" in the subject line and tell me a little about yourself. If you want to gauge where your business growth potential is and identify where the biggest opportunities in your business lie, or where the key needs that you need to concentrate on right now are, take our assessment where you will receive personalized advice for improvement. It's quick and free. Go to scaleupgrowth.scoreapp.com. If you would like to work with me one-to-one, I love coaching and get the best outcomes that way. Send me an email at jonathan@scaleupgrowth.co and put one-to-one in the heading. Tell me a bit about your business and let's see how we can apply a great strategy for your business. So that's it for this week. Tune in next time for more great learnings from a scaling entrepreneur.